Imagine an island so critical that if it disappears from the global economy tomorrow, gas prices worldwide could skyrocket, stock markets could crash, and two nuclear-capable regions could plunge into a catastrophic war. It isn't Manhattan, Taiwan, or Hawaii. It's a tiny coral rock in the northern Persian Gulf called Kharg Island. Right now, as tensions between the United States, Israel, and Iran reach a boiling point, Kharg Island has found itself dead center in the crosshairs of global geopolitics. When President Donald Trump openly warns the United States might assume total control of this specific island, he isn't just talking about a piece of land. He's talking about striking the ultimate economic juggernaut of the Iranian state. Let us look at why this tiny island holds the key to the entire Middle East conflict. The geography, nature's perfect oil spigot. To understand the geopolitics of Kharg Island, we first have to look at a map. In the macro view, look at the left top northwest corner of the Persian Gulf. Kharg Island sits right out in the open water, about 25 kilometers or 16 miles off the coast of Iran's Bushehr province. It is situated roughly 480 to 660 kilometers northwest of the Strait of Hormuz. This means it sits deep inside the Gulf, protected by the Iranian mainland. But its oil must travel all the way down the Gulf to get out to the rest of the world. In the micro view, the island looks like a small elongated pier or a rough rectangle, measuring about 5 miles long and 3 miles wide. On the map, you will see a massive T-shaped marine pier on the east side and a sea island terminal on the west side. These are the giant loading docks where supertankers park. The middle of the island is packed with large circular shapes. Those are the million-barrel crude oil storage tanks. But Kharg has also two other massive geographical qualities that make it unique. First, it has natural deep waters. The Persian Gulf is surprisingly shallow, which makes it hard for massive oil supertankers to get close to the mainland. Kharg Island, however, is surrounded by naturally deep water. Supertankers can sail right up to its edges without running aground. Second, it has freshwater resources. It is one of the very few islands in the Gulf with its own natural freshwater supply, allowing Iranians to build massive, permanent industrial infrastructure there. Because of this, in the 1960s, Iran turned this coral rock into the world's largest offshore crude oil terminal. Today, up to 90% of Iran's oil exports flow through this one tiny island. It features a massive network of storage tanks capable of holding millions of barrels of oil connected to the mainland by giant underwater pipes. Let us talk about the geoeconomics of the island and Iran's financial lifeline. In international relations, we talk a lot about geoeconomics, how nations use economic power to achieve political goals. For Iran, Kharg Island is the beating heart of this survival. Historically, between 90 to 95% of all Iranian crude oil exports pass through Kharg. While Iran has built a secondary terminal at Jask outside the Persian Gulf in Gulf of Oman, its capacity is a fraction of Kharg's. The center of the island features a massive farm of storage tanks with a total capacity of 30 million barrels of crude oil. The island features a giant eastern T-jetty for smaller tankers and the western sea island terminal. Together, they can load super tankers at a rate of up to 360,000 barrels per hour, allowing multiple very large crude carriers VLCCs to load simultaneously. We know that Iran's economy has been heavily sanctioned by the West, but it stays afloat by exporting oil, largely to buyers like China. Much of that oil goes through Kharg Island's massive T-shaped marine piers. If Kharg Island is operational, the Iranian government has money to fund its budget, its military, and its regional allies. If Kharg Island is destroyed or captured, Iran's economic spine is instantly broken. This makes the island a prime target. During the 1980s Iran-Iraq War, Saddam Hussein's military bombed Kharg Island hundreds of times to try and bankrupt Iran. Today, history is repeating itself. With recent attacks by the U.S. Air Force on the island and direct threats of a U.S. takeover, Kharg is once again the ultimate economic target. Let us also have a look at the geopolitical catch-22, mutual deterrent. The question is, if Kharg Island is so vulnerable and so important, why hasn't the US or Israel just seized it or wiped it off the map already? This brings us to the core international relations concept of mutual deterrence, a geopolitical standoff. If the US or Israel launches a full-scale assault to capture or permanently disable Kharg Island, they face three massive problems. First, the retaliation threat. Kharg Island is only 21 miles from the Iranian mainland. Any hostile force trying to occupy the island would be sitting ducks, completely exposed to Iran's heavy artillery, ballistic missiles, and drone swarms. Second, the Strait of Hormuz choke point. Iran has made it clear that if their oil exports are stopped, nobody's oil exports will leave the Gulf. They could retaliate by mining or blockading the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow chink through which 20% of the world's oil passes. Third, the global inflation shock. If Kharg is hit and Hormuz is closed, global energy markets would experience an unprecedented shock. Gas prices in the West would surge overnight, potentially triggering a global recession. So now we can understand President Trump's shift toward targeting Kharg Island represents a transition from the traditional deterrence to an aggressive maximum pressure strategy aimed at forcing a breakthrough in stalled peace negotiations. Historically, the US avoided striking the island due to fears that Iran would retaliate by closing the critical Strait of Hormuz, triggering a global energy crisis. However, because the US military has successfully degraded Iran's air defenses and successfully escorted millions of barrels of oil past Iranian threats, Washington no longer views Iran's blockade warnings as an absolute deterrent. By threatening Iran's single largest economic lifeline, the source of up to 90% of its oil exports, Trump is using the island as the ultimate bargaining chip to compel Tehran to capitulate to its nuclear program. Furthermore, this strategy shifts the military focus away from civilian infrastructure to avoid widespread humanitarian fallout, like the disruption of regional water supplies. Instead, Trump's approach mimics a forced asset seizure or total blockade akin to US policy towards Venezuela, with the explicit goal of stripping the Iranian regime of its financial power while attempting to stabilize global markets through direct control of the oil spigot. Ultimately, whether Kharg Island is physically seized or heavily bombarded, its status as Iran's singular economic lifeline ensures that whoever controls this tiny coral outpost effectively controls the financial and geopolitical leverage of the Middle East.